Lizardmen, Seraphon, whatever you want to call them, the April 2024 update is now with us, and they got a massive boost in power with the new models, with the new Kroxigor, with the new Aggradons, the points breaks and Skinks, all of that stuff. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. We're going to be checking out those new models, and we're going to be seeing how they're going to be affecting your list building going forward. If, of course, you like what you see, please, of course, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you want to throw some more support my way, you can join me here on YouTube as a member. You can join me over on Patreon. You can join me over on Streamlabs. Either way, you're going to get to see content before it's released. You're going to get to see some behind the scenes content, how I make things, and you're going to have a little bit of a say into the kinds of videos that I produce in the future. Without further ado, let's get going. Hold on to your butts.
Welcome to Jurassic Park.
Okay, so first thing, and probably the most significant thing that Lizardman got, finally, massive brawler style, kind of high damaging, really punchy models. I'm talking about the new Kroxigor, massively improved. I mean, the models are way better anyway, but the fighters themselves, I think the trade-offs that they've made from the old Kroxigor to the new Kroxigor, I think are very much worthwhile. Here they are. You've got the two of them, the Warspawn and the Kroxigor itself, 200, 205 points. They have slowed down from their old incarnation, so they won't be as quick along the battlefield. They're really movement 4 now, but they make up for it in other areas. Starting with the Warspawn, let's look at what's common between the two of them, and then we'll look at some of the differences. So they all have 2-inch range, which is very good. All have movement 4, all toughness 5, 28 wounds. This makes them really tanky for the 200 points that you're paying. So to give some kind of a reference, for the 200 points mark, you're usually paying that for kind of bespoke style leaders and not nearly so much damage. So seeing this on a 200 point model is very welcome, I think, for Lizardman, and it's something they can definitely do something with. Going on to their differences, the Warspawn has a 3536 damage profile, which is pretty good. Average damage 7.13. The basic Kroxigor has a 2648 damage profile, which I find is really interesting because Games Workshop did a lot to curtail the points of all of those different fighters in other factions with that 4.8 damage profile because they want to promote the more mid-rangey style of meta, and yet they still release these kind of Kroxigor in the same pack. Now, whether they get a little bit of a points break due to them being unallyable is kind of debatable, or whether it's a route that they want Lizardman to go into with this kind of more mid-rangey, let's say 6 or 7 fighter kind of more brawly warband. I don't know, but it's very welcome from a Lizardman standpoint. The Kroxigor itself, 6.33 damage profile, but it's mainly going to be wounding on 3s with that strength 6, as opposed to the strength 5 on the Warspawn, which is, well, it's good. You do have things like Stormcast running around with base toughness 5, so it might find it a little bit more difficult to choose through those kinds of units. Going on to the abilities, each one of the Kroxigor has a specific ability to it. The Warspawn has the Spawn of Chotek double, which is +2 attacks to melee attack actions made by this fighter when one or more endangered friendly fighters are within 6 inches of them. And to be endangered, you have to have the minion room mark, so we're basically talking about Skinks here. And that fighter has to be within 1 inch of one or more enemy fighters, so this is important, so it can be one or the other, has 1 or more damage points allocated to them. So you either have a skink within 1 inch, or you have a skink that's been wounded, or you have a skink within 1 inch and that has been wounded. Either way, you're going to get to use Spawn of Chotek to get your extra 2 attacks. Now, of course, it's more difficult to pull off than a flat onslaught, but I do think with fighters like the Starblood Stalkers, who are a little bit more bulky than your regular skinks, I think it's doable. You can do things like, I think this is something that you can set up on turn 2. So run one of those 10 wound skinks in. It can take the first hit because it can just use the Starborn reaction to reduce those crits into hits. And then you can have your Kroxigor use his double Spawn of Chotek +2 attacks, and suddenly it's swinging for 5 attacks at strength 5 with 3/6. It's a massive damage profile. It's really good, if you ask me. The Kroxigor itself, the normal one, has brutal blows. So if they are within 1 inch of 2 or more enemy fighters, you get half the value of the ability, rounding up to the attack's characteristic of the next melee attack action made by the fighter. So it can get up to 3 bonus attacks, but it will depend on the value of the double that you're taking. Now, the question is, how many attack actions are you going to get? If you only get to attack once, then of course you want to Brutal Blows, because Onslaught will only give you one attack in that case. If you get to attack twice, then you can either use Onslaught or Brutal Blows, because it will net you the same amount of bonus attacks than using Onslaught. But if you have your triple 3 and you're going to be attacking once or twice, you can use Brutal Blows, get +3 attacks, you net more attacks and more damage overall. I've got the figures down here for you of Brutal Blows versus Onslaught or Spawn of Chotek, which one you want to be using. The really interesting thing between the two different kinds of Kroxigor, I've seen a lot of people say, oh, the War Spawn is bad because you can just take a normal Kroxigor and then you can bless it with +1 attack and it's a 3/6/4/8. Now, that is fantastic, but once you start blessing it with +1 attack, you're looking at a 230-point model, and it's no longer comparable to a 240-point model. I think each of the Kroxigor has different uses depending on how it is that you want to play. Now, recently, I've been playing a lot more ability-heavy warbands, where I'm going to be needing my dice to do all sorts of different fruity things throughout the battle. What this means is that I've got a new appreciation for fighters that don't necessarily need dice to be able to perform. And for that, that's really where the War Spawn goes in, right? It's got 3 attacks at strength 5 with a 3/6 damage profile. You don't need any bonus dice. It can just walk in, it can swing, and it can do relatively well. Versus the normal Kroxigor, you really want to either be throwing an extra dice into there for Brutal Blows, or you want to be throwing an extra dice in there for Onslaught. But of course, all of these dice that you're putting into your Kroxigor are being taken out elsewhere. So for example, if you're running a Slan, the Slan will not be able to use its bonus extra attack if you're just using all of your doubles in your Kroxigor, right? I kind of like the normal War Spawn. I think it's solid as it is. Yes, there's an argument to be made for, okay, just buff your Kroxigor with +1 attack, 3/6/4/8, whatever. But you could do that to the War Spawn as well. Make it a 4/5/3/6, which is a crazy damage profile. It's kind of like an Annihilator Prime. That's where we're sitting in the kinds of damage. I think whichever one you want to bring, they will both do well. It just depends on the rest of your list and the rest of your game plan, where you want your dice to go. If you feel that you can spare the dice every turn to dump into your Kroxigor, then by all means, take a normal one, bless it with +1 attack, and go to town. It will rip through things. But if you feel like your dice are going to be tight, go with the War Spawn. You'll be absolutely fine. But one thing that I also want to mention is that they do all have the Tearing Bite triple that all of your Saurus gets. So you're going to be adding half the value of this ability to the damage points allocated by each hit and critical hit made by the next melee attack action by this fighter. So without boosting your Kroxigor, of course, it's going to go better on the War Spawn because he has more attacks to be able to swing in there. If you do boost either of them, I think still you want to be using it on the War Spawn. Why? Because if you're giving both of them +1 attack, the War Spawn with 4 attacks is more likely to hit than the Kroxigor with just the 3. What else has been added? We have Aggradons, all of the different flavors of Aggradons that you have. I'm going to quickly go through these because I think there are a couple of interesting points to be made. We've got the Lancer with Club and Spear, and then we've got an Alpha with Club and Spear as your kind of brawly, almost expensive leader types. They do all have Tearing Bite, just like all of your normal Saurus. As always, if you're going to be using Tearing Bites, you want to have it on a higher attack profile, which means that it will maximize the chances of you doing all of that extra Tearing Bite damage. In this case, you'll have the same attacks, so it doesn't really matter in that case. It's just a nice boost of damage that you can use. Again, going back to my argument about the Kroxigor, how many dice are you willing to throw at things will determine which one of these profiles you want to use. Now, Tearing Bite is a triple, and you kind of see this with the new Nighthaunt. I've been doing a lot of testing with them. When everybody is really triple hungry, you're only really going to get one good Tearing Bite off a turn if you can. And then similarly, if you have a lot of good doubles that you want to use, in the case of the Kroxigor, the Slam, the whatever, you might be, instead of making triples, using doubles instead. So I wouldn't bank on Tearing Bite, but it gives you a nice ability to do a lot of spike damage if you absolutely need to. What they do have, all the Aggradons, is the ability Predatory Leap. It's on a triple, You make an additional 3-inch move. You can fly as part of that move, so you can leap over things. You can kind of phase through things, which is really fun. And then after you finish that move, you can pick a visible enemy fighter within 1 inch of this fighter, and then you're going to allocate a number of damage points equal to half the value of this ability to that fighter. Again, this is a triple, so it's going to be competing for your Tearing Bite dice. However, I think that the use of Predatory Leap, you're really going to want to use it in very specific scenarios. It is very useful, that leap being a fly move. That I am going to say, because you can do things like park yourself behind a wall, leap to begin with to get yourself over that wall, and then carry on 8 inches. I think that's really, really useful. But in terms of the damage component, I think you're going to be seeing a lot less use out of that than just the extra bonus move with the fly. In terms of the profiles themselves, I really like the Lancer Alpha with Celestite Club. I think that 3-4 damage profile is fantastic. I like it because it's very, very consistent. Similarly with the normal Lancer with Club, it has a 3-4 damage profile. It's got 3 attacks, which not fantastic, not as good as 4 attacks, but for 185 points, it isn't super, super expensive, which is something that I kind of like. I'm not a big fan of these spear profiles, despite the 2-inch range. The 2-inch range kind of goes very nicely with that 8-inch move. It gives you a 10-inch threat range off of 1 move action, but I'm not a super big fan of that 2-5 damage profile. I'd rather go 3-4, get that extra base damage in there, than getting the +1 spike damage on the off chance that I do hit that 6 and I do hit that crit. So that's what I'd be looking at. Now, if you wanted to upgrade on top of that, there is the Scar Veteran on Aggradon, 295 points, so much more expensive than the Alphas. I'm going to compare him to the Lancer Alpha with Club because I think that's the closest comparison. So what does he get? For 50 points, he's paying for +1 strength, +1 crit, and 5 wounds. Now, is +1 strength worth the 50 points that you're paying? I personally don't think so. I don't put so much stock in that extra point of crit, so it's really just the point of strength, I think, that is the most useful thing here. The extra 5 wounds, yes, of course, is nice. And yes, you can put more points into the Scarvet on Aggradon, and you can make him even more expensive, and you can make him better, but that just widens the gap between him and the Alpha. So I would still be looking at the Alpha, I think. I think an Alpha with a straight +1 strength boost is almost just as good as your base Scarvet. Now, what does a Scarvet have over the normal guy apart from those stats? It basically has the same abilities as the Alpha with Celestite Club. The Alpha, because it does have that hero remark, does have the Cold-Blooded Commander double, which boosts both of their damage efficiencies up. They both have Tearing Bite, both have Predatory Leap, and both have Wrath of the Old Ones. So I'm not convinced. I would boost the Alpha with +1 strength, and then I would bank the 35 points that you save. You'll be seeing when we come to our list building that you're going to be looking at something like a 6 or 7-man warband, and that extra 35 points you're going to be saving from the Alpha over the Cold one, I think can be used better elsewhere. Next up, we have Raptordons. I really like Raptordons. I think you look at their stats, and it's like, oh, they're not going to do any damage. But then you realize they are 10-inch move. They have the minion room up, which is real nice. It kind of works with your Kroxigor if you want to swing, get those +2 attacks that war spawned. And they have 12 or 14 moves, depending on if you take the basic one or the Alpha. What they do have, because they are Skinks, they get the Nimble Retreat double, which gives them a free disengage. Then on top of that, they have another double Raptordon tactics. If they have a ranged weapon remark, so only the Hunters, so not the Chargers, because they don't get to make ranged weapons. They get a bonus move action up to the value of the ability, which on a double is really, really good. And if they don't have a ranged weapon, they get +2 attacks until the end of their activation. So your basic Raptordons go up to 5 attacks at strength 3 doing 1-3, or your Charger goes to 6 attacks at strength 3 1-3. Now, what are these guys for? I've been using Fast Cavalry a lot more recently. I think with the rise of Horns, I mean, I don't want to say rise of Horns because Horns of Hashut have always been at the top, but with the recent updates, I think a lot of their competitors have moved down somewhat. So you've got things like Horns of Hashut with their flamethrowers. You've got Quiet Pock, who can sit back and shoot. You've got the Arbalista. All of these pieces are doing very, very well at the moment. And I think there is a very good argument for taking one of these fast cavalry pieces to at least run in there and then tie up things like flame hurlers and these ranged attack guys and these problem shooters for at least a turn, so that it gives the rest of your warband a little bit of a reprieve and you're just not losing models wholesale. Now, there are better fighters for that, but I think at 110 points or 120 points for your Raptordon Hunters, these Skinks are cheap enough that with that 10-inch move, on turn 1, they can go move, tie up a Flame Hurler. The Flame Hurler can either attack them back in combat, which you're not going to kill 12 wounds worth of Skink, or it can disengage and fire, in which case, again, it's unlikely you're going to kill a Skink. Or the Flame Hurler will have to waste its triple to use Dark Flames of Artifice, and if it's using that triple on a Raptordon, as opposed to something more expensive, you're going plus. So yeah, I think they definitely have a use. Probably not the alphas, but your basic Raptordons I think are very good. If you just want them for the wounds, because realistically speaking, there isn't a whole lot of difference between the alphas and the normal hunters, it's just like 2 wounds. You can always bless these guys up. So a Raptordon Charger with +4 wounds to make it 16 wounds is 125 points, which is less expensive than your Charger Alpha with 14 wounds. And 16 wounds coming from Hunters of One-Chi player, where you are comparing the 10 wound One-Chi's claws to normal Skinks, you get a lot out of those 4 extra wounds, especially on something like the Charger, whose real job isn't to kill things, but is to run disruption. Then we have normal Skinks. So normal Skinks got a buff. They are now both down to 65 points. The real question is, do you take them against the Starblood Stalkers? Because the Starblood Stalkers still exist. They are still in faction. They compete directly with each other. Now, I think in terms of your normal Skinks versus Zepic, so let's look at Zepic first. Same points. Zepic gets a couple of extra wounds, gets 1 point of toughness. You're going to be bringing Zepic. So convert up a Zepic, bring Zepic. He'll always do well for you. I think this might have been something that was just missed. Maybe we'll see it in the next update, because it looks like they did that kind of thing with Sons of Velmorn, where they pushed up the price on similar fighters. But yeah, always brings Epic. Now the question is, are you going to take Ottapatl and Tok versus normal Skinks? Normal Skinks get a 15 points break over Ottapatl and Tok, so you have to really be saying, okay, what am I bringing these fighters for? Why am I bringing them? And is it worth bringing them over your basic Skinks? I think in the case of Ottapatl, there is definitely an argument to be made. Ottapatl has the bonus move double if no one's within 12 inches of him. He's got the very good blowpipe with the 5 crit. He has 10 wounds over normal Skinks 8. Sure, he's got toughness 2, but it doesn't really matter in this case. So I think you definitely want to bring Ottapatl. I think he's worth the 15 points extra that you're going to be paying. Top, on the other hand, I am not totally sure. He's kind of like a budget version of Ottapatl in effect, but not in points. So I would be tempted just to bring normal Skinks over Tok. I would always bring Zepic over normal Skinks, and I would bring Ottapatl if I had the extra 15 points to spend to upgrade him. Next up, so the only things that were removed from the Lizardman lineup were the Kroxigors, and they've been replaced with the new Kroxigors. Salamanders still exist, but we've got the new spawn of Chotek. Very similar in points cost, very similar in role that they're going to be playing. Both Spawn of Chotek and the Salamander have the Beast Room mark, so they get to use Hunting Pack off of the back of Skink Handlers, which is very, very good. Will give them a bonus attack action. So let's look at what we have. The Spawn of Chotek has a melee attack action, 2/4/2/4, which is a fine damage profile. It's okay. It's nothing to write home about. Its range attack action, 2/5/2/3. Now, we're going to be comparing that to the normal Salamander, which is a 2/4/3/6. Of course, on the face of it, the Salamander does more damage because it just does more damage with its abilities. But there is something that I kind of want to point out here when you look at the difference between the two. And that's the Spawn of Chotek's ranged shooting attack has a strength of 5 versus the Salamander's strength of 4, which means that you do not need to bless up the Salamander to strength 5 to get the most out of its 3/6 damage profile. Because once you add blessings into the mix, and you say, right, I'm going to give my Salamander +1 strength, you're looking at a 150 point model, and 150 points versus 130 points is a lot more. So when we are comparing a 150 point Salamander to 130 point Spawn of Chotek, I think it's a lot more favorable on the Spawn side of things. The Spawn is a little bit more bulky. It's got a couple more wounds. It has toughness 4, which is very, very nice. So the question is, which one do you take? And I think you still take the Salamander. Having no minimum range kind of means that it's shooting attack is going to be better than the spawn of Chotek's melee attack. But I'm going to caveat that by saying I would only take the Salamander if I had the points to upgrade it to strength 5, because you really want to be winning on 3s with those 2 attacks. Chotek does have that minimum range on there, but again, with that melee attack action, it's not so bad. I think they're comparable. I'm not on the same boat as some people saying spawn of Chotek is just worse than the Salamander. I think they have their different pros and cons, but yeah, I think if I could buff it, Salamander. If not, spawn of Chotek. Okay, I've got a couple of lists here. This is some stuff that I've been playing about with that I'm fairly happy with. I think it's kind of nice. So realistically, likely you're going to be picking either the Slan Star Master that you're going to buff with +1 strength, or you're going to be taking a Scarvet on Aggradon as your main hero, simply because they're the best ones. However, we did talk about this a little bit already. Is the +1 crit, +1 strength, and 5 wounds worth it for the 50 points you're going to be paying at your Lancer Alpha? I don't think so personally, but that's really up to you to decide. I would normally be taking the Lancer Alpha and then boosting it with Blessing of Strength, then looking at the Scarvet on Aggradon. That's just me. If you get more mileage out of the basic Scarvet, you can still buff that thing up with more damage if you really want to. So I think you'll be doing well regardless which one you want to bring. Other heroes don't really seem all that necessary. There aren't a lot of amazing heroes sitting in Seraphon. There's nothing your basic Saurus can't do that your Aggradons can't do anyway. You have stuff like Star Priests, you have stuff like Pixie Taka. If you wanted to bring all of those, you still can. But I think you're going to be getting more bang for your buck out of either of these 2 picks. Your Kroxigor choice really depends on the availability on your dice. But as a default, normal Kroxigor +1 attack blessing, you're always going to go well with there, depending on how many points you have. If we're looking at allies, I think some good allies might be the Quest of Soul Sworn, because it has that bonus move double, which is very, very good on either your Kroxigor to get them into position, because you only have move 4, on your Aggradons, they've got that movement 8 to really catapult them across the board directly into combat, or on your Slan, because, you know, sometimes it gets stuck and you need to move it to get it into a good position. So that extra bonus move with the fly, I think, is very, very good. Of course, you could just take Calthea to get all of that, but Calthea does cost 210 points. So she's a little bit more pricey, especially in a warband whose average points seems to have gone up simply because there are better options for you. Now, the couple of choices that I have that I put together, the first one, teleporting Kroxigor, the Star Master famously has Lords of Space and Time as a triple. It works very much like the Cypher Lord's triple, so you pick a guy within range, teleport that guy to the Slan within range of the dice. So you can use that to teleport anyone with the Seraphon rune mark. In this case, we're going to be teleporting Kroxigor to get them where they need to be. So we're going to take a Slan Star Master with the Blessing of Strength, push that shooting attack up to strength 5. It becomes a 3/5/3/6. It's got the double that allows it to shoot or move again on a kill. It's very good. It's very expensive, but it is an awesome piece. Then we're going to take 2 Kroxigor Warspawned. Warspawned are the base 3 attack versions. The reason why we're taking Warspawned and we're giving it Blessing of Wounds is that we cannot afford normal Kroxigor to give it Blessing of Attacks. That's basically it. On top of that, most of our dice are going to go into the Star Master anyway. So yeah, I think by themselves, normal Kroxigor, very good, and they work with the Star Master pretty well. We got Otterpaddle, we got Zepic, and we got a pair of Skinks. That brings this up to a 7-man warband. I feel like in this current environment, whereas in the old environment, you generally had like 2 proper threats on the board plus a bunch of guys, we're seeing a lot more list building with 3 or 4 melee threats or 4 like proper threats. And that's really where you want to be, because otherwise, if you're just bringing 2 big threats, they kind of get bogged down and they can fold, whereas having 4 threats is much more difficult for your opponent to deal with. So that's why we're going 7-man here with the 2 Kroxigor and the Star Master. Any one of those 3 can do the damage. Any one of those 3 can do what you need to do. If you wanted to bring allies, I've got a list here. The Lancer Alpha with Celestite Club. He's going to get the Blessing of Strength, bring him up to Strength 5. Errant Questor with Grand Hammer with the Blessing of Attacks. The request store is there to either catapult your Aggradon Lancer Alpha 8 inches or to move your Kroxigor an additional 4 inches to make sure it gets into the fight a bit quicker. We have the normal Kroxigor with Blessing of Attacks, 230 points, very good. Got that 4-8 damage profile. I decided to go here with Saurus Warriors. Saurus Warriors are still good. I know we haven't really talked about them because they're not new, but they still have Tearing Bite. They can still do that spike damage, and they're still fairly tanky for what you're paying. I think 85 points is a very fair price for a Saurus Warrior. And the alternative, if we were just to downgrade those to Skinks, doesn't really get you an extra threat or more guys. So you could just take 2 Saurus Warriors, have them kind of buddy up, and they can be your extra threat if you really need to for a triple in them. And then finally, we are also running with Otterpaddle and Zepik to round this out to a 7-man list again. So yeah, this is where I think we are looking at the moment. Some combination of Starmaster, Alpha, Kroxigor, Skinks is where we're mainly going to go. And yeah, this is. I think either of these lists are pretty solid, and either of these lists should have the ability to do what you need to do. You'll notice that there are no Raptordons in there. You could trim these down a little bit to get a Raptordon in there, and then that would again give you that extra range disruption piece to be able to take down those fighters with very good range attacks. I think that's just a meta pick for you. If you feel like those fighters are going to be a problem, get the Raptordon. I think it'll do pretty well. If you think it's not going to be a problem, then you don't need it. All right, that is it for me for today. Thank you very much for watching. Yeah, overall, I think Seraphon, I mean, we covered this in our big old tier list video. If you want to watch that, you can find the link up there. I think Seraphon are going to be very, very good in this edition. They seem to have transitioned from this Tearing Bite platform to here's a mid-range kind of brawlery warband, which I kind of like. I love the Kroxigor models. I think they're fantastic. So it's really good for them to have some very nice profiles to go with that. So yeah, I think Seraphon are going to do really well. They seem to have all the ingredients that they need to be a success. They have good heroes, they've got good mid-rangey guys, and they've got cheap chaff. So what else do you need? Time will tell to see if we are right on that. But I would say if you're a Seraphon player, things are looking up for you. Now, as always, if you like what you see, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And let me know down in the comment section below what you think about the new Seraphon models. If you've got any interesting Seraphon builds, that's something that I would love to hear. If you've got any interesting allies, any thoughts on the new fighters, any interesting combos with Divine Blessings, I'd also love to hear that. Slap that down in the comment section below, and yeah, we will have a good talk about it. But yes, that's it. Like I said, that's it from me for today. Thank you very much for watching. As always, I've been Itan, this has been Off Meta Musings, and we'll see you next time.